This week's Parsha is Parshas Korach. In Perek Tazayin Pasuk Vav, Moshe Rabbeinu says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Vayichar leMoshe ma'od vayomer el Hashem al tefen el minchasam. Don't turn to their mincha. Zok Rashi al tefen el minchasam lefi pshutei. According to Pashup Shat, it's referring to Haktayus shehei makrivim lefanecha machar al tefen aleim. Don't accept their ketayus. V'hamedrash Aimer, the Medrash says, Zok Rashi, Yedea ani sheyesh lahem chelek betmidei tzibur. I know that they have a chelek in the tmidei tzibur. Af chelkam lo yikuba lefanecha l'ratzon. Don't be mekabel their chelek. Tanichenu ha'esh v'lo teichlenu. Leave over, let the fire not burn it, because it's their chelek in the carbon tzibur. So if you take a look at it, Rashi brings it from a Tanchuma. It's also a Bamidbar Rabbah in Parsha Yud Ches Ois Yud. The Medrash says like this: Hayitzarich lemikra loymar al tefen el avedasam. The Torah should have said al tefen el avedasam. Mahu el minchasam. Why does it say to their mincha? Kach amar Moshe lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what Moshe said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yibaynu shalom. Yedei ani sheyesh la'elu chelek ba'isa mincha sheikrivu. Shenemar, like it says a pasuk, and it brings a pasuk from Parshas Pinchas. What does it say? Milvad oilas hatamid uminchasa, v'haisa shall kol Yisrael kreva, and it was of all of Klal Yisrael. So hayil upirshu elu mibanecha al tistakel bechelkam. Don't look at their chelek. Tanichenu ha'esh va'al teichlena. Don't let the fire burn their chelek. So this is the Medrash. The Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu was davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that don't accept their chelek in the carbon mincha from the Oilas Tamid that was brought together with the Oilas Tamid. That's the Rashi is bringing, the Medrash Aimer. That is what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, Al Tefen El Minchasam. So in the Sefer Chidushay Riyach, on the Medrash there, he asks a kasha that l'chayra, the pasuk that Rashi brings, that the Medrash brings, Milvad Oilas HaTamid U'Minchasa, that's a pasuk of Chag HaShavuos that's said in Parshas Pinchas. Rashi should have brought the pasuk that it says in the carbon tamid itself, which is V'asiras ha'efa soilas l'mincha blula b'shemen. Why did Rashi bring the pasuk that's referring to the Oilas Tamid and its mincha? Agav, it refers to it in the Parsha of Shavuos. Should have brought the pasuk that says Mefurish, talking about the Oilas Tamid and its mincha. So that's one kasha that the Chidushay Riyach asks on the Medrash. The Netziv and Hamikdavar asks a Bamba kasha. He says that the Gemara in Chagiga Davav Beis that we said last week in Chumash, the Gemara says that from the time of the Miraglim, they did not bring the carbon tamid at all. So what does it say? Umani Mekayim, like we said, the pasuk in Amos, Hazvachim umincha higashtem li b'midbar. So how could it say that we were makriv the Oilas Tamid? So the Gemara answers, Shiftei shalevi shalei avdu avodah zara heini krivu oisa. They're the ones that were makriv. Shevet Levi was makriv the Oilas Tamid, not Klal Yisrael. And last week we stelled on the Rishash that brings a raya from here that by Stois they were nezufin already from the Egel because it says Shevet Levi Shlei Avdu Avodah Zarah. But that's not the stel this week. The stel this week is that l'chayra, how could the Medrash and Rashi say that Moshe was davening al teven el minchas that they have a chelek in the Oilas Tamid and it's mincha? Don't let the fire burn their chelek of the mincha. What do you mean? They didn't even bring the mincha. Shevet Levi did. So Elamai, you're going to say that what Moshe was saying, Al Tefen El Minchasam, he's referring to Korach, who's from Shevet Levi. But if you look at the Ramban says that the Pashup Shat in this pasuk is referring to Dasan and Avira. Ramban says, he's going on Rashi, and he says, "Ve'einu nachem be'enai sheyeh al haktaris." It doesn't make sense it should be on the ktaris. Lefishal doesn't va'aviram hu aimer kain. Moshe Rabbeinu got upset at Dasan and Aviram from the psukim before, right before, and shechara lo al devreim v'heim lo hayu b'seicha eda anayadim al Hashem lahakter k'tayis, and they were not part of the 250 Nesiya Eda that brought the k'tayis. So when it says al teven al chasam, avad is referring to Dasan and Aviram, and Dasan and Aviram did not bring. So the Ramban is saying did not bring the Ketarius. But so when Moshe said Al Tefen El Menchasam, he was talking to Dasan and Aviram. If he was talking to Dasan and Aviram, then they didn't bring the carbon tamid either. Sheva Levi did. So l'chayra, this medrash is dachapela. So I saw in the Sefer Megadim Chadashim, he brings from a Sefer Binyan Shleimer, who wrote a tshuva to the Baal Mechaber Sefer Chidushay Riach, and he wants to be mechadish like this. He wants to say that the Klal Yisrael Avada did not bring Eilas Tamid in the Midbar, but that was during the weekdays. But on Yontiv, there's no din of being in Chayrim. And if that's the case, that on Yontif there's no din of being in Chayim, then it could be Klal Yisrael brought a Eilas Tamid on Yontif. So what does he want to say like this? So he says, Lefi zeh, you could say that the day that this happened was Shavuos. It was the Yontif of Shavuos. And Vibalta was the Yontif of Shavuos. Memela, Klal Yisrael was able to bring the carbon tamid. If Klal Yisrael was able to bring the carbon tamid, so then Avada Dasan Aviram had a chelik in it. He says that's the pshat. Why the Medrash brings the pasuk from Pinchas. The Chidushay Riach asked the kasha, why the Medrash bring a pasuk from Shavuos, that the Eilas Tamid of Shavuos. It should have brought the pasuk of Eilas Tamid itself, of the Mincha itself. The Torah says because this carbon we're talking about on Shavuos, and he also says so, and that answers the kasha of the Netziv, that the Gemara says they didn't bring the carbon tamid the entire time they were in the midbar because they were in Chayrim. Yeah, that was during the week, but on Yom Tov avada not. And he says Lule de Mistafina. He wants to bring a raya to this because the Kiyadua Rashi brings that Korach einay hit asay because he saw Shalshalas Gedula coming from him. He saw Shmuel, who was Shakal Kameshav Aaron, coming out of him. When was he Mamlich Shaul? When did Shmuel make Shaul into a king? That was on Shavuos. And Kiyadua, the godless of Shmuel, was recognized on the day that he was Mamlech Shaul. So Shmuel on Shavuos, he was Mamlech Shaul. How do you know that? Because the pasuk says, "Haloi Ketzir Chitim Hayom." It's Ketzir Chitim, and the Sefer says that Shavuos is also called Bikurei Ketzir Chitim. Grada, I remember hearing from Reb Sruli in Parshas Vayetze a phenomenal mahalach in Ruvain and the Dudayim, and the pasuk over there says Vayhi b'mei k'tzir chitim, and there's a alshich that says that the whole Maisa happened on Shavuos, because there's a medrash in Megillas Rus that whenever the Torah says k'tzir chitim, it's referring to the Shtei Alechem, it's referring to Shavuos. So there's a Mefurish medrash in Rus that whenever it says K'tzir Chitim, it's referring to Shavuos. So Zak the Sefer Binyan Shleimer that Shmuel, when did Shmuel become Shmuel? Shmuel became Shmuel on Shavuos, on K'tzir Chitim Hayom. So Korach, on this day, he saw on Shavuos, that Shmuel was going to come out of him. And when did Shmuel become Shmuel? He became Shmuel on Shavuos. So he wants to say that it could be that this whole Maisa of Korach happened on Shavuos. And that's why Korach Einai Hitase, he saw Shmuel coming out of him. Yeah, on this day, Shmuel was coming out of him. It was going to be mamish on this day. And he says that Lefi Zetz Meduyik, the Lashon of the Medrash, that the Medrash adds in a couple words, V'haisa shall kol Yisrael kreva, that it was belongs to all of Bnei Yisrael. Why did the Medrash add those words? V'haisa shall kol Yisrael kreva. It was all of Bnei Yisrael. So Zakta Sefer Binyan Shleima, that the reason is because this was irregular throughout the year. Klal Yisrael was not part of the Karban Tamid. But on this day of Shavuos, Klal Yisrael was part of the Tamid. So that's why it says, V'haisa shall kol Yisrael kreva, that it belonged to all of Bnei Yisrael, not just Shevet Levi, like the Gemara in Chagiga. Fine. That's what the Sefer Megadim Chadashim brings from the Sefer Chidushay Riyach and the Binyan Shleima. So, to get a little background, we need to understand, when did the Ma'aseh of Korach Taka happen? What in the history of Klal Yisrael, when did it happen? So, there's a Rashi that says, when it says Vayishma Moshe Vayipol al Panav, Zokt Rashi, Mipnei Machlekes, because of the Machlekes, Shekvar Zeh Biyadam Sirchon Revi, because this is already the fourth sin. Chatu be'egel Vayichal Moshe, when Klal Yisrael was chayt in the egel Vayichal Moshe, B'amis Eininim Vayispalo Moshe, B'amiraglim, it says Vayemer Moshe Hashem V'shamu Mitzrayim, B'machlekuse Shal Korach Nisrashlu Yadav. But by the machlekes of Korach, Moshe Rabbeinu already got shvach. And then Rashi brings a mashal ben Melech. Okay, but l'chayr, what do you see from this Rashi? Zokter Aim. What do you see from this Rashi? That the Ma'aseh of Korach happened after the Meraglim. That's what you see. Frakter Aim, that Rashi in Devarim, when the pasuk says v'chatzeiros v'dizav, zokt Rashi v'chatzeiros, Rashi says all those words in the beginning of Devarim are referring to different places. Zokt Rashi chatzeiros, that's the machlokes of Korach. The machlokes of Korach. Now l'chayra chatzeiros, Klal Yisrael was in chatzeiros way before the Meraglim. The pasuk at the end of Ba'aloischa says, there's also other psukim, but at the end of Ba'aloischa it says, "Va'achar nasu ha'am mechatzayers va'yachanu b'midbar paran," and then only afterwards did the Meraglim happen. So, Frakter Aim that we have here, Stira and Rashi. Rashi in Parshas Korach is saying that Korach happened after the Meraglim, but Rashi in the beginning of Parshas Dvarim saying that Korach happened before the Ma'aseh Meraglim. And the Sifsei Chachamim asks that Lefias Mahalach in the beginning of Parshas Shlach, it's also mevur that Korach happened before the Ma'aseh Meraglim. He's busy with the Smichos HaParshias. Okay, so the Re'aim says that this is Hashita in how Rashi works, that sometimes Rashi brings a medrash here and sometimes Rashi brings a medrash there, and they're chaylik. The Rashi doesn't have to stim in every single place. L'maisa, I didn't see anybody bring a raya from this, but when Dasan and Aviram said in Perek Tezayin Pasuk Yud Gimel, Hama'at ki elisanu me'eretz zavas cholav u'devash lahamiseinu ba'midbar, you took us out of Mitzrayim to kill us in the midbar. Who said anything about killings? Zakt Rashi Teich Dvarav, Ela gazarta aleinu lahamiseinu ba'midbar she'amarta lanu ba'midbar hazeh yiplu pegrechem, that you told us in this midbar we're going to die. When did Moshe Rabbeinu say that? Moshe Rabbeinu said that in the Meraglim. So Rashi again over here says that Korach happened after the Meraglim, because Dasan and Aviram said that, how did they know that they were going to die in the midbar? Because Moshe Rabbeinu said, by midbar zeh yiplu b'greichem, Moshe Rabbeinu said that by the Meraglim. So this is another raya that Rashi held, that Korach happened after the Meraglim. So I saw brought in the Sefer Shari Aaron, he brings from one of the Yud Aleph Perushay Rashi, in that Chumash, the Yud Aleph Perushay Rashi, he brings a different mahalach in Rashi, he says that it could be that what happened by the Meraglim is, Rashi says over there, Penu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, Penu usu'u lachem. Rashi says, Penu la'acherechem, go backwards. So, Klal Yisrael was already in Kadesh Barnea, they were in Midbar Paran, and by the Meraglim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, go backwards. So it could be that what happened here is that the Meraglim happened in Midbar Paran, and then they went back to Chatzeres where they came from. That's how this Sefer Nachas Yaakov wants to be miyashiv the stira in Rashi. The Chayot's Geshmak Mahalach. Now, I saw it was bothering me that if Korach happened after the Meraglim, so then we know the Gemara says, famous Gemara, in a couple places, that the Gemara says, the Amar Mar, Ad Shaloi Kalu Meisei Midbar, Loi Haya Dibur Moshe. There was no Dibur in Moshe. Shenemar Vayihi Kasher Tamu Kol Anshe Mecham Lamas Mikar Ba'am V'samach Lei Vayidaber Hashem Elai Lemor Elai Haya Dibur. So Moshe Rabbeinu, all those years that Klal Yisrael were in the Midbar and the Meisei Midbar were still alive, the ones who had to die, there was no Dibur with Moshe. So it was bothering me if Korach happened after the Meraglim, and here we have Vayidaber Hashem Moshe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe. So what's going on? So I found there's a fascinating Rashbam on that Gemara. Zakter Rashbam, Pa el Pa, Lohaya Dibur Moshe, Pa el Pa kibetchila. It wasn't Pa el Pa. Avalim hutzuchu ledibur kigaim b'maisa de Korach shahaya achar maisa meraglim. If there was a dibur necessary in the Maisa of Korach, which happened after the Maisa Meraglim, so here you have a Mefurish Rashbam saying that Korach happened after the Meraglim. Hayemedaber al yedei malach ay beurim v'tumim. He would speak with a malach or urim v'tumim. That's one mahalach of the Rashbam. Then he says, Inami lehayemedaber imoy ela al yedei tzorich Maisa tzorich lahem. Or the Rashbam says that it could just mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't talk to Moshe only when it was very necessary, but otherwise he didn't talk to Moshe. Rashi and Tainus says another pshat that it wasn't pel peh ela b'chizayin laila gimgum. It was like at night. That's how he talked. That's how Moshe Rabbeinu got a dibur from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gvur Sari and Tainus Lamed Amabay says that he can't be makabel such a mahalach of the Rashbam or Rashi. There's no way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't talk to Moshe Peh all the time. He says I think he says the only good shot is the second shot of the Rashbam, that Avada Moshe Rabbeinu HaKadosh Baruch Hu talked to Moshe, but only when it was completely necessary. I wanted to say Agav. I saw the Sefer Megadim Chadashim brings a Gemara in Sanhedrin, Kuf Yud Amud Aleph, famous Gemara as well. The Gemara says, Vayishma Moshe vayipol al panav. Moshe heard everything going on with Korach, and he fell on his face. So the Gemara says, Ma Shmuel Shama. What did he hear? So Amar Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni, Amar Reb Yonasan, Shechashtuhu me'eshes ish. They were chayshid Moshe Rabbeinu of eshes ish. Shenemar vayikanu leMoshe b'machana. The pasuk in Tehillim says that they did the kinui. Amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak v'lamed shekol echad ve'echad kinei as ishtei mi Moshe. That they told their wives, don't be misyachid with Moshe Rabbeinu. Shenemar u'Moshe yikach es ha'oil v'not aloi michutz l'machana. That Moshe Rabbeinu took his tent and put it outside the machana so that they shouldn't be chayshid him. So this Gemara is mamish Paladika Gemara, that they were chayshid Moshe Rabbeinu of Eishes Ish. So the Megadim Chadashim brings from the Goyen wrote this in his Sefer Adaris Eliyahu and Parshas Balak, Madura Tlisai. There's like 6 Maduras there, so if you don't know it's in the third one, it's going to be hard to find. But it's in Madura Tlisai, and it Zok the Goyen. Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Hashalom Hayaloi Maila Shu kibel adibur mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmai. Uneviim, so Moshe Rabbeinu was special. He got it straight from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Uneviim mipi emtzai. They used to get it from a middleman. Dahainu al yidei malachim shenikru ishim. Malachim are called ishim. So Zok the guy, and that's the pshat in this Gemara. Melamed shechashtu me'eshes ish hakavana hu ki heim amru kala eda kulam kandashim. They were mashveh themselves to Moshe Rabbeinu, and they were chayshid that his nevuah came me'eshes ish, from a ish. What's the me'eshes? What does it mean eshes? Because Zok the guy, ki yadua, a isha is mekabel from a zachar. An isha accepts from a zachar. So that's what they were saying. Chashtu me'eshes ish, that they were chayshid that Moshe Rabbeinu was getting his nevuah from a malach. And the guy over there says that this is what Aaron and Miriam made the Zelba mistake, the same exact mistake. So they were chayshid that Moshe Rabbeinu was getting his nevuah just like everybody else from a malach, because a malach is an ish. So like this Rashbam and Baba Basra, not only were they chayshid him, but it was taka correct that Moshe Rabbeinu was taka only getting nevuah from a malach, but that was only because Klal Yisrael was in Cherem, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't be miyachid. Avad Moshe Rabbeinu had a higher level of nevuah, and he was different. But I just wanted to stall to this guy to the Rashbam that like the Rashbam, Korach was taka right, and Miriam, the Maisa Miriam happened. It could be past. The Maisa Miriam happened before the Meraglim, so they weren't in Cherem yet. Depending on what the Cherem was, if it was the Avodah Zarah, if it was the Egel, if it was the Meraglim, that's getting back into that whole shmuz. But it could be B'shas Korach. That was taka the mahalach of the nevuah that Moshe Rabbeinu was getting. So they were taka right, but that wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu's madrega. His madrega, avada was pel peh. Just because of Klal Yisrael, he wasn't able to get that. So that's a mefurish Rashbam in Baba Basra that says that the Maisa of Korach happened after the Maisa of the Meraglim. Mamish mefurish, he says Maisa Korach haya achar Maisa Meraglim. And that's the Parshas of the Lashonos of Rashi in Parshas Korach. Now the Ramban in this week's Parsha brings the Even Ezra, and he says, the Even Ezra says, this Maisa happened in Midbar Sinai. This happened before Klal Yisrael ever left Midbar Sinai. It was while they were there for almost a year. Zakta Even Ezra, the reason why he's saying that is because Becharim were jealous of the Leviim that took their spot, and because of that, Korach, who was a Bechar, and Das and Aviram were upset that the Bechar was taken away from Reuven, their father. That's the Even Ezra that it happened in Midbar Sinai. The Ramban is chaylik very stark. The Ramban says that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't take away the Bechar from Reuven. Moshe Rabbeinu, that was Yaakov Avinu. And he brings the Raya Lamisenu Bamidbar, means that they were saying that it happened after the Ma'aseh Meraglim. But Zakta Ramban, beautiful words. Bine, Yisrael b'Yosem b'Midbar Sinai, La'ira lahem shumra, nothing bad happened. He says even by the Egel that it was such a big chait, and still the Mason were only 3,000, and Moshe Rabbeinu saved them. Zakta Ramban, v'hinei hayu oyavim Moshe kenafsham. They loved Moshe Rabbeinu. V'shaymim elav kasher yitzav lahem, and he listened to them. V'ilu haya, and they would have listened to him with anything he said. V'ilu haya adam mayrid al dvar Moshe bizmanahu. If somebody would have been mayrid hayu am cyclin, I say, they would have stoned him. V'lachein, Zakta Ramban, saval Korach gedulas Aaron. Korach was soivel the gedula of Aaron. V'savlu ha'becharim mailas halavim v'chol ma'asav shel Moshe. And they were soivel everything. We'll get to this lashon maybe a little later on. And all these bad things started happening. Lo yispalol Moshe aleim, v'lo yibitel agzera mehem. When they sinned in the Meraglim, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't daven for them. He was not mevatel the gzeira. This is the Ramban L'Shitose that we said last week, that Moshe Rabbeinu just davened that it should be erech apayim. He didn't daven that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be mevatel the gzeira. And that's why even in Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say that he davened for them, because he didn't want the sons to have tainus. Why didn't he daven to mevatel the gzeira? So, Zak der Ramban, v'nigzar al kolam shitamu b'midbar sham yamusu, v'haya armin belibam, and they were saying ki yavayu lam b'divrei Moshe takalos, that whatever Moshe says, look, bad things happen. V'oz matzah makim Korach lachlik al ma'aseh v'chashav ki yishmu elav ha'am. Then Korach thought, now is a good time to fight. And Klal Yisrael said, the same way we were told we were going to get into Eretz Yisrael, and now that's batel. So our son, who said our sons will ever get them? And that's why Zak der Ramban v'zeh tam tulunoisam heina b'makim hazeh achar gzeres hameraglim miyad. That this ma'aseh of Korach happened immediately after the gzeira of the meraglim, because Korach found Avada Korach wanted to fight the whole time. That's what the Ramban sounds like, but he was just soivel. He was soivel it because he knew he couldn't start up with Moshe. But now, when everything is bad and Klal Yisrael is all upset at Moshe, now Korach said, now is the time I could fight. But what do you see from the Ramban? The Ramban is learning, like the Rashbam, and like Rashi, the Parshas of Rashi, that Korach happened after Ma'aseh Meraglim. But the Ramban likes too that it happened miyad, immediately, right after the Gzeres of Meraglim. Not a little later. It happened right after. So now that we know when the Ma'aseh of Korach happened, it's a four-way machlekes. The Eben Ezra says it happened in Midbar Sinai. Rashi and Devarim is mashma, it happened in Chatzeres, before the Meraglim, but after Midbar Sinai. Rashi, the Rashbam and the Ramban, and Rashi and our Parshas say it happened right after the Meraglim. It happened in Midbar Paran in Kadesh Barnea, exactly where the Meraglim happened. And then we have the Nachos Yaakov's Mahalach, that it happened in Chatzeres after they traveled backwards, like Rashi brought. So let's get back to what we started. The Sefer Binyan Shlomo said that the Ma'aseh of Korach happened on Shavuos. That l'chayra doesn't stem with 3 out of the 4 Mahalchim. The Eben Ezra that says that the Ma'aseh of Korach happened in Midbar Sinai, that for sure it can't be, because it for sure happened after Matan Torah, which was Shavuos, and then Klal Yisrael left Midbar Sinai on Chaf Iyar. The pasuk Mefurish says, "Vahi b'shana hashenis, b'chaydesh hasheni b'esim lachaydesh." So they left on the 20th. They left on the 20th of Iyar. So there was no Shavuos for them to be in Midbar Sinai that the Ma'aseh of Korach could have happened. And like the Ramban and the Rashbam, that the Ma'aseh of Korach happened immediately after the Meraglim, that either doesn't make sense, because the Meraglim happened Tisha B'Av. Immediately after that is not Shavuos. So the Ma'aseh of Korach can't be on Shavuos. Now you want to know, what about according to the Mahalach, that it happened in Chatzeres? So the Gemara in Tainus Mefurish says that they only came to Chatzeres on Chaf Aleph Sivan. Because if you make a cheshbon, they got to Kibbutz Hatava on Chaf Beis Iyar, because they traveled for 3 days. This is all the Gemara in Tainus. Also, if you want a quick recap, there's a Cheskuni at the end of Parshas Ba'aloischa that goes through it. So they got there on Chaf Beis Iyar, and then they were there for a month. They were there for 30 days in Kibbutz Hatava. Then they got to Chatzeres on Chaf Aleph Sivan and Chaf Beis Sivan, and they were there for 7 days, which makes it for Miriam, which is Chaf Tes Sivan is when they left there, and then 40 days later is when the Ma'aseh of the Meraglim happened on Tisha B'Av. So in Chatzeres, they were not in Chatzeres on Shavuos. So it doesn't stem with that Mahalach either. The only Mahalach that you could say it stems with is according to the Nachos Yaakov, that says that Rashi, that like Rashi says, Pnu su'ulachem la'acherechem, that go backwards. So obviously the Nachas Yaakov is not learning that it happened immediately after the Maisa Meraglim. So then you could say that it happened almost a year later on Shavuos. Tisha B'Av, the Meraglim happened on Tisha B'Av, and then they went backwards to Chatzayros, and they were there for a while. And you could say that the Maisa of Korach happened on Shavuos. I just want to ask one more ha'ara, that the Kiyadua, that Korach, the Medrash Rabbah, the Tanchuma, and the Yalkut, they all say that Korach was Mitayanei ha'aron. He was one of the carriers of the Aron. And the Medrash goes on to say something about Korach. But I always heard, I think back from Yeshiva, that what was the Chiddush? What's the Medrash saying? Korach Mitayanei ha'aron hayu. That he was from the carriers of the Aron. So what? What does it make a difference? So I always heard that the pshat is that the Aron, Kiyadua, Rashi, and Bereshis brings, not in Parshas Bereshis, but Rashi says that the Aron used to be Mechala Shevet Levi. It used to kill out Shevet Levi, because if you weren't completely Kaddish, you weren't a complete Tzaddik, then it used to kill Shevet Levi. And the Ramban even tells that too. The Ramban, when he handles Shevet Levi, why they were so small, he says that they're still in Midbar Sinai. So if they're still in Midbar Sinai, they weren't carrying the Aron yet. They weren't carrying the Aron yet, so the Aron wasn't killing out Shevet Levi, so that can't be an answer why they were so small. And the Kliyakar in this week's Parsha says on the Pasuk Tes, Hama'at mikem ki avdila l'kei Yisrael eschem yadas Yisrael, that what was Moshe Rabbeinu saying to Korach? He says, Hama'at mikem, you Shevet Levi, you guys are so small. Why are you so small? Because the Aron kills you out. Now you want kahuna? You want kahuna gedola, where you're going to go lifnai v'lifnim, and there it's even a bigger sakana. So that's what the taina was, the kliyakar, geshmak pshat. And hama'at mikem, you Shevet Levi, you're so small because the Aron is mechala you. The Aron kills you out unless you're mamish kaddish v'tar. So I always heard that that's the pshat in the Medrash Korach mitayanei Aron hayu, that Korach must have been a tzaddik gomer. If he was a tzaddik gomer, and still he was able to fall because of his kina or whatever midah ra he had. The haraya, he carried the Aron. So this doesn't stem with the Eben Ezra that says that the Ma'aseh of Korach happened in Midbar Sinai, because in Midbar Sinai they hadn't yet carried the Aron anywhere. They hadn't moved. They hadn't gone anywhere. So Korach mitayanei Aron, you wouldn't be able to say this pshat like the Eben Ezra, because like the Eben Ezra, they didn't move at all. And even like the Ramban, we mentioned we were going to come back. The Ramban seems to say that Korach always had in his mind to argue with Moshe. It just, he knew that he couldn't until he found the right time. So if that's the case, you have to know, if Korach had it always in his mind to have a machlokes, then how could he have been mitayanei Aron? How could he have carried the Aron if he always wanted to fight with Moshe Rabbeinu? Unless you say that the lashon of Sovel, I heard this from someone, that maybe you could say the lashon of Sovel means that not only was he just did he endure this argument, maybe it means that he settled himself. He gave himself hifa enfer zechataretz. But as soon as other bad things happened, so then it always brings up the everything else that you had tainus. So it could be that it could stem with this the Ramban, but l'chayr the Eben Ezra, it's a raya, noch a raya. Not everything has to stem. But it's this medrash that says Korach mitayanei Aron. If you learn that the pshat is that even though he was tayanei Aron, he must have been a tzaddik gomer, and Aron wasn't mechala him. The Aron didn't get rid of him. That doesn't stem with the Eben Ezra that says that it happened in Midbar Sinai. Yashakayach.